Hi, good afternoon. My name is Gladys Sanchez, and I am the WIOA Youth Career Advisor here in Pender County with the NC Works Career Center. And today I'm going to be co-hosting a workshop with Pender County Library on interview etiquette. And this is the first presentation in our interview workshop series for this month of April. And in our next presentation, we'll be doing post-interview information presentation. So for this one, we'll go ahead and get started and kind of just go over interview etiquette. So there are a few types of interviews that you could be selected for if you're applying for a job. Those are telephone interviews, in-person interviews, group or panel interviews, and then now in the times that we are in, video conferencing interviews as well. So we're going to kind of touch on each one a little bit, some of them a little bit more than others, but I did want to make sure to include all of them so you could so just in case you're ever in any of these types of interviews that you feel prepared in terms of the etiquette that you need to present. So first, we're going to touch on employer expectations for any interview. And so we have top 10s and we're just going to go through each one. So the first employer expectation is to speak clearly and smile. The second is appearance. The third is remembering body language. The fourth, be ready to explain your background. So just be prepared to have some information written down about yourself, kind of what people call your elevator speech. And then number 5 is prior knowledge of basic tools. Number 6 is math and reading skills, because you never know if you're applying for any position where you will need some reading or math skills. You'll want to be able to present during your interview that you have those. The 7th would be strong answers to behavioral questions. And so what this means, and we'll probably touch on it just a little bit later down in this presentation, but behavioral situations like what if customer comes and says, this or that situational thing, how do you respond to those situations? And you want to have some good answers for those. The 8th employer expectation is your desire for the job. I know sometimes we're applying to 10, 20, 30 jobs at one time, but you want to be able to see yourself in each of the jobs that you're applying to and really have that desire to join that company. The 9th is passion and confidence. Those are really important because if you are among many applicants, people who show passion and confidence may have a leg up in the interview process. The 10th, last one is willingness to be trained. So you're willing to be coached, you're willing to learn, and those are really important attributes to have when you're going into a new job. So now let's talk about the interview. And like I mentioned, this is also about all interviews. So we're not there yet where we're breaking up the types of interviews. This is overall across the board tips. So you want to go in feeling confident. You don't want to make excuses about why you won't get the job. You never know what you can achieve until you try. You want to picture yourself in the position. You want to picture yourself the first weekend of your new job, the first month of your new job, the first year into your new job, and all of the things that you can accomplish. And think about how it would feel to join this company, whether that's the environment, whether it's about maybe coworkers, maybe you already know somebody within the company. Think about how you would feel working on different teams or projects, taking new roles as you're joining the company. So really just in any kind of situation, think about the benefits of the company and things like that. So really think about it so you can kind of get a feel of how excited you're going to be for joining a new company. And then remember, with every question that the interviewer asks, he or she is looking for something. So they have expectations for the answers that you will be providing. So now we're going to talk about interviews do's and interviews don'ts. So first we're going to start with interview do's. If you are traveling for your interview, you want to verify that you have transportation and that you're leaving space for travel time in order to get to your interview early. So this is really important. it's always those big important dates where something happens. And so you just want to double make sure that you have alternatives. So if you have your own vehicle, you want to make sure you have a backup plan, like in case your vehicle doesn't start, in case you can't find your keys, something happens. You want to make sure that there's someone nearby you who can come and pick you up in case of an emergency. Um, and travel time, you always want to leave extra, you want to leave earlier than normal for an interview. Just in general, if you're being there 15 minutes early, it's better to just get there maybe 20-30 minutes early, just to make sure that you're not encountering any traffic. You want to choose your interview attire. That's really important. You want to do that maybe a day beforehand. You don't want to do it the day of, because maybe it can become stressful. And then you want to schedule adequate rest prior to your interview, and to relax and have a clear mind. You want to minimize coffee prior to the interview, because we know what caffeine does to us. And you want to consume a light meal too, to just feel comfortable and relaxed during your interview. And you want to practice relaxation techniques. Sometimes when we are interviewing in front of strangers, in front of new people, we tend to get really nervous, even just speaking. And so you want to make sure that you have some relaxation techniques to help you through the interview and before the interview and after the interview as well. And also really important, electronic devices. If you have like a smartwatch, a smartphone, if you have a computer or anything like that during the interview, you want to make sure that it is prepared to not interrupt you in your interview. So it's better to just turn off the cell phone. Make sure you're not having any interruptions, any dings, anything like that, because that can be a huge distraction during your interview. So now some interview don'ts. These are kind of small things, but there's a lot of interview don'ts. These are just a couple. So you don't want to chew gum before or during the interview, especially during the interview. It can seem a little rude for some employers. You want to make sure that you're coming to the interview alone, and not bringing any relatives or friends or family members. And like I said, you don't want to bring an electronic device to you with the interview. You don't want distractions or disruptions. And also, you don't want to arrive to the interview with food or beverage. There's very few things you need to bring to the interview, and those two are not any of those. And like I said, there's probably lots of other interview don'ts. You can always kind of just do a little quick Google search, and just make sure that you are not doing anything that can turn off your employer. And really quickly, I want to talk about the STAR method. This has become really popular for interviews now. And knowing the STAR method, utilizing the STAR method can create a really good outcome for your interview. So what is the STAR method? It's situation, task, action, and result. The first is whenever you're being asked an interview question, like, how would you handle this? Or what is something that you've done that you're proud of in your last job? Or just any of those questions that you have to bring an example up, or an anecdote or a story about what you did in your previous jobs, or what kind of experience you have. You want to set the scene. You want to describe the purpose, explain what you did, and share the outcome. So for example, let's say I'm asked, how would you resolve a conflict between two customers, or between an employee and a customer who are disagreeing, and you are the manager of that previous company. You want to set the scene of what was going on, what was the disagreement, and then what you kind of did to resolve it. What is the purpose of I guess, sharing the story to your new employer? The purpose is, you're able to show that you are good with conflict resolution. And then you want to explain what you did to resolve the disagreement. Did you come to an agreement? What occurred? And then you want to share the outcome. Obviously, you always want to share an outcome that's positive and that speaks good about you. So always make sure you already have some of these examples previous to your interview. You don't want to make these up on the spot. So make sure you have a couple of these situations and outcomes prior to. And then once you're in your interview, utilize the STAR method. Set the scene, describe the purpose, explain what you did, and share the outcome. So now we're going to jump into the different types of interviews that you can be selected for any job that you're applying to. So the first one we're going to discuss is telephone interviews. And here are some quick tips and quick, I guess, like etiquette guidelines whenever you're receiving a call for a job interview over the phone. You want to respond to all incoming calls with a professional tone of voice and greeting. So you don't want to say, like just I've heard really random things of people answering the phone, sometimes like answering as a like what is it, food place? Can I take your orders? People have really done a lot of random, greetings. And so you want to make sure that no matter if it's, a friend or, a relative or anybody that you may not have their ID saved on your phone, you just need to make sure you have a professional tone of voice and greeting all the time. You want to speak clearly in a voice that is audible and not rushed. This is really important because phones have just this weird connection where sometimes you can't really hear, depending on your phone, depending on the background noise that from the employer. It's sometimes just really hard to hear on the other end. And so you really want to speak clearly and calmly. You want to note the name, title, and company of the caller. So anytime, really, this is really important. Just try to have something to write with whenever someone's calling, whether it's your phone, whether it's, a quick piece of paper and a pen. And you want to write down these important items because, this could be the fifth company that's calling you. And whenever you hang up, you're like, okay, who was that? I totally forgot what company they're calling from now. So you want to make sure you're noting these things down. You want to confirm contact information and dates for all follow-up items. This is really important. You want to make sure you know who called, where you can reach them at if you were to have another question or need to know some piece of information for the next step. So, and you want to make sure you're confirming that contact information and dates for any future things that you will be calling them for. And preparing yourself for telephone interviews is also really important. If you know they sent you an email, hey, can we schedule a telephone interview for next week, Monday at 10? You want to make sure that you're preparing your environment for that telephone call. You want to establish a quiet environment. Like I said, making sure that you are limiting background noise and if possible, eliminating any kind of background noise. You want to have a copy of the job description and resume during the interview. So if they're calling, but they can't see you, you still need to have the job description so you know what you're talking about when they give you questions about why you want this job and why do you think you would be a good fit. And you also want to make sure that you have your resume on hand so you can quickly look over quickly look over any of the skills that you have on your resume that would be good to brag off or to show off to your employer. You want to make sure to take notes during the interview to write down next steps or post-interview questions. And let's see, face-to-face interviews. And now we're on to face-to-face interviews. So this is going to go a little bit longer just because now with a lot of restrictions lifting up, face-to-face interviews are starting to become more and more of a thing. And so you want to make sure that you're still equally prepared if you're requested to come in person for an interview. So dressing for success is really important whenever you're going to an interview in person. There is a value in looking professional. And so what this means is marketing yourself begins with a professional appearance. First appearances make a very lasting impression, and nonverbal communication conveys a strong message as well. So by maintaining a professional appearance, you become a walking advertisement for yourself. This is really, really important. And I think that this is more so I guess, just common knowledge about whenever you are going to an in-person interview, these are things that are expected of you. But I know that now, because a lot of it is online, we can kind of forget these things. But dressing for success is not only important when you're going to in-person interviews, it's also very important when you're doing a Zoom interview, and even a telephone interview, because even though they don't see you and you don't see them, it gets you into like a situation, it gets you into kind of an environment where you're like, okay, I feel like I'm gonna be confident being dressed for success and I'm gonna land this job. So really, it's just very important. And now we're also going to talk about interview etiquette when you are in person. Obviously, right now, with a lot of COVID restrictions, we're not necessarily doing firm handshakes during introductions, but I guess this is all very situational, and it really depends on the timeline. You could be watching this next year, and now handshakes are a thing, but pre-COVID, firm handshakes are really important. You want to maintain an erect body posture to avoid slouching, and you want to modify the tone of your voice to emphasize important points. So this is really important. Modifying your tone for emphasizing important points is key for any interview, for any speech, for any presentation. The more you emphasize certain things, the more people pay attention. And those are the things that they're going to remember afterwards. So making sure that you follow that tip. You also want to smile and express a warm and friendly demeanor and turn on the personality. Sometimes I know really, like when you're going for an interview, you have to put your best foot forward. And I think that that's always said for anything. And when it comes to important speeches, interviews, calls, business meetings. And so you really want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward during an interview. And you want to actively listen to the interviewer. They're probably interviewing you for 15 to 20 minutes, and they're really just trying to cut down to the chase of what the company offers, how you can be an asset to the company, and here are the important things you need to know so you can make a decision. So you need to actively listen to what they're saying so you really get a feel for the company and if it would be a really good fit. And you want to be prepared, you want to prepare questions for the employer. And so what that means is you just want to have questions prepared. That's really important. That's big with interview etiquette. You don't want to just leave the meeting or the interview and say, no, I don't have any questions, but thank you so much. Like, I think that kind of leaves the employer wanting more from you. And then, sometimes you will later on regret saying like, dang, now I do have questions. But I could have gone prepared beforehand if I would have, So it's really important to go ahead and prepare those before the interview. If you are going to a face-to-face interview in person, these are the things that you need to bring. You need to bring copies of your resume because yes, the employer might already have a copy, but you just never know. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're coming from another meeting and they're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to go get their resume. You always want to be prepared and bring your own copy. You want to bring a pen and paper for notes and questions while you're in the interview. And you also want to make sure that you have directions to the interview site and the contact information for the employer. This is really important because, like I said, there's a lot of things that have gone on with interviews, forever. And there's always these crazy situations that it's just sometimes it's hard for us to control. Some of them are out of our hands. But if you cannot make it to the site, if you cannot make it to the interview, you have to call and let them know, can I please reschedule? This happened. But you can't just not contact the employer. They will probably never offer you another interview or a job opportunity because you didn't follow up and let them know I wasn't able to make it because of this. And so it's really important to make sure you have that when you're going to the interview. You want to bring in your ID and your social security card in case, you are hired on the spot and you accept or whatever. It's really important to have those items with you. And then if you are, an artist or you have some kind of portfolio, work samples are always great, and then references. So this is really great. Let's say you didn't provide any references when you applied for a job, but you do have like a document listing your references, they may ask for your references during the interview. And so you'll want to provide that document with those references. And then breath mints, if you are needing those for the interview to feel, clear-minded, relaxed. So now we're going to jump into group interviews. What is a group interview? Employers use group interviews based on the premise that using multiple interviewers will make a better choice, reducing the chance of a bad hiring decision. Group interviews normally involve a Q&A session, so question and answer, and often involve an exercise or test that simulates a potential work environment. Group interviews are definitely something that have become very popular over the years, especially if there's dozens and dozens of applicants. And it's a really good way to reduce a lot of good candidates. And so if you're selected for a group interview, just know that you've probably been selected for good reason, and they would have not offered you a group interview if it wasn't for your application and resume. It's really hard to even land a group interview if that's the company you're going for. So preparing for a group interview is definitely a little bit different than other interviews. You want to arrive at least 15 minutes prior to the interview to review just the layout of the room. And this is something interesting. I mean, when you're going to an interview, and if you're allowed to even go near the room where you're going to be interviewed, it's important because group interviews happen in a lot of ways. You can be in a circle, you can be in a line where you're being interviewed by a panel. It could be like a kind of like a conference room as well, where there's several tables, and you're just thrown anywhere in the room. So it's really important to know, like, am I going to be straight looking at them? Can I hide in the back? Can I, is there going to be enough space for me to feel comfortable? And then how are we going to be spaced out? Because it's important to know beforehand, so you can prepare yourself. You want to demonstrate a positive and confident attitude when meeting the interview panel. This is really important. Let's say, and I know right now with restrictions it's very different, but even in the past, when you are being interviewed by multiple people, you want to make sure you greet every single person and that you introduce yourself to every single person. And then you want to demonstrate a positive and confident attitude when meeting the other job seekers. And this is really important because you want to make sure that you're still maintaining professionalism during the interview, and that maybe it'll make you feel less nervous too, just knowing and speaking to other job seekers. You preparing for the group interview, you want to make sure you really know the company and the position. They may ask just basic facts about the job description. Like, do you know what duties will be day to day? If you don't even know that, or let's say you don't know when the company was founded, when the company became partnered with another company, like if you don't know the simple facts about a company and the position, you're gonna be told thanks, but no, and thanks, but no thanks. And, it's not going to be good. So you want to make sure you really know the company and the position you're applying to when you're in a group interview, because those can be really fastly selected when you're one of those that doesn't really know much. And then lastly, video conferencing interview tips. So like I said, a lot of the interview etiquette tips that we've discussed apply to every kind of interview, whether it's do's and don'ts, dressing for success. Those are all really important, but we know that because of our current situation, video conferencing has become very, very popular and used really every day now. And so we want to make sure that we are still keeping interview etiquette during Zoom interviews, or what we call now video conferencing interviews. And so there's been a lot of grace shown by employers, because we know it's very new, and technology can have its quirks, but it's also really important to make sure that you're doing everything on your end to make that a successful interview. And so what are some tips? Some tips are making sure that you have a solid plain background for your interview, wherever that is, wherever you can find a solid plain background, but you want to make sure that you have one and that there's nothing distracting in the background. You want to still be presentable and well-groomed. Just because you were video conferencing them doesn't mean you can still be in your pajamas. you still want to be presentable and make that first good impression. This is really important. You want to log in early onto the video conferencing platform to ensure tech functionality. And so what that means, it can mean so many different things. You want to make sure you know how to use the mute button, how to use the chat feature, how to raise your hand if needed. You need to be able to make sure that you're able to even log on. And if you're not, you need to make sure that you're emailing whoever it is that you need to make sure that your tech issues are resolved before the start of your interview. You don't want to, you know, your interview's at 12 p.m. and you're logging on at 11:58 and you realize, oh my gosh, I don't know how to even get into this platform. I didn't know I had to sign up and create an account. So it's really important for you to figure all of your tech. Obviously, you want to practice with the video conferencing platform maybe a day or so before, but the day of, you still want to make sure you're logging on early just in case of any of those tech issues. And also really important, you want to still maintain eye contact through the camera. You don't want, I know sometimes it's really easy to just look at like a wall or look at something else while you're on camera to avoid getting nervous. But it's still really important to make sure that you're looking at them and you know that they're looking at you too, so they know that you're actively listening and not being distracted by other things. Also, lastly, very, very, very important is knowing how to utilize the mute button and practicing with the mute button. um, Whenever you're not speaking, you need to put your audio on mute for, you know, to minimize background noises, to really make sure that you are listening and that you're able to hear them clearly. And I'm sure they're probably doing the same thing on their end, but you want to make sure you're using the mute button when you're not speaking and then turning it off when you are going to speak or ask a question. So, lastly, what are the interview's over. You've made it through the entire interview, 15, 20, 30 minutes have passed. And now they ask you, do you have any questions for me? And so you want to say yes, and then you want to ask your questions. And the answer is, why is it important to ask questions? Questions show that you are interested in the position, that you have further interest, that you are very passionate about it. And so I wanted to include some possible questions to ask after finishing your interview. And these are really broad. So obviously, the more detailed your questions can be for that company, the better, because that can really lead into really great conversation. So you can ask, what is training like for this position? And they can answer, you know, training goes for a month, you know, you're on trial, after training this happens. You can say, how would my work be evaluated? Are there performance goals? Are they quarterly? Are they yearly? How would you describe the company culture? This is really important too, because you may really love this position, but if the company culture is not necessarily a place where you feel like you could grow later on, that can be, you know, a deal breaker. So, and then another question would be, what do you see as the greatest challenges of this position? What qualities do you look for in a successful candidate? And what can I expect to know your decision? That's really a common question, and really easy question. What are the next steps? What is there anything that I need to do now? When can I expect to know your offer? And lastly, what kinds of questions would you not want? What kinds of questions would you not want to ask? And so I think lastly, what that means is just making sure that you're not asking unprofessional questions or asking questions on the interviewer when you really should be asking those questions to maybe HR or a different person in the company. So those are some questions, but like I mentioned, the more detailed, the better. It makes for great conversation. So in summary, you want to always go in feeling confident during your interview. You want to review the top 10 employer expectations. You want to dress for success. You want to be prepared, and you want to ask questions. And so that is the end of our interview etiquette workshop. If you have any questions, feel free to bring those to me. You can contact me, or you can contact Jen and Kidney at Pender County Library if you have any further questions on interview etiquette, or even if you're needing a mock interview, feel free to reach out and we can set those up as well. But thank you so much for tuning in, and we will hopefully have you again in our next interview workshop on April 22nd. All right, thank you. Bye.